Such great stuff, Randy.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely going to mention. I'm going to tell that story too.
Oh my God, there's so much.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh God, this is
yeah.
just. I feel like I'm a tourist. I'm
Yeah,
gonna be.
it's going to be fun. You're going to. I'm going to take you deep into the world of Presbyterians, Pentecostals, and these experiences that are not completely unlike the experience you had with the horse. So, that's what I think is going to be interesting. So
I'm ready for a transcendent experience.
there you go. That's right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Faiththeism Project podcast. This is number 41. Yeah, that's
Do it. This is awesome. I'm loving it, man. Let's keep it going.
Absolutely. My name is Alan Katz. I've always been grateful to Hebrew School for making me the atheist I am today.
And my name is Randy Lovejoy, and I am a pastor without a church. I'm just going to be simple. I'm not going to say anything other than that this time. I'm just right there. Yeah, I'm done.
And yet not.
That's right. There'll be a lot more, but yeah.
This podcast is a somewhat of a continuation of a conversation we started last podcast, which had to do with spirituality and healing, the healing process. It touched on faith healing, and it clicked something in Randy that the experiences that he has gone through, and we're about to get to some place where I just the previews that I've gotten. I can hardly wait. I hope the rest of you enjoy this as much as I'm going to. But before we get there, I wanted to pay a little bit of a tribute to an old boss of mine who just died. Mm-hmm. I used to do a show called Tales from the Crypt back in the day, and one of my executive producers was Dick Donner, along with Joel Silver and Bob Zemeckis and Walter Hill and David Giler. But among the active executive producers who we saw from time to time and had conversations with, Dick was one of them, and Dick was wonderful. He was Dick, in addition to executive producing Tales from the Crypt, he was a huge mostly action motion picture director. He was very well known for the entire Lethal Weapon franchise. He directed all 4 of those. He directed the Goonies.
Wow.
Scrooged. So, not all action. He started as a TV director. He did everything in TV in the 60s, everything from combat to every show you could possibly imagine. Dick directed episodes of it. And anyway, he became one of the biggest action directors in all of Hollywood, and he was a wonderful man to work with. Just a big bear of a man with a growly, gravelly voice, and just a warm guy. Total pothead. Which, in now that I'm a total pothead, it makes me love the man even more.
Endeared you to him, yeah.
Among the movies that Dick directed is The Omen, and when I had the pleasure of working with Dick, and you get to ask them all kinds of questions just in the course of working with him, and one of the things that Dick shared with me was his thinking why The Omen was such an amazing success. And his explanation went along these lines, that especially amongst Americans, a lot of Americans have a family Bible that they all know it's in the house. They've never cracked it. Mm-hmm. Never read that book, but it's there, and it's the family Bible. And what The Omen did differently from The Exorcist, which preceded it, was that it used the Book of Revelation, the actual text, as the...
Wait. I've got to say one thing. I'm sorry. You actually got right the name of that book, because Hollywood blows it constantly.
They make it plural, don't they?
Yes. And it's like annoying because it's always the character that are supposed to know the Bible, and they're like, in the Book of Revelations, da da da. It's like, it's not Revelation.
It's one revelation.
Yeah. So, man,
it's just
way
one
to
revelation.
go, Alan. I mean, I am impressed. I am seriously impressed. That's good. Keep going. Sorry, but I just had to say something.
But maybe they're just thinking sequel.
maybe that's it.
In their defense. So Dick's theory was that the script for the Omen drew heavily on the Book of Revelation, and certain choice nuggets of spookiness, particularly the sign of the devil 666.
Yes.
And Dick, the terrific director, used every bit of that to total effect. Well, of course, as in America, people sat down and they watched the movie, and suddenly words from the Bible were suddenly coming to life, and with terrible prophetic effect. And the movie would finish, and they'd be terrified, and slowly they'd recover, and then they'd get home and they'd look to where the family Bible was, and they'd run to it, and they'd open it.
That's right.
And they'd find the words right there in the family Bible.
Yes.
In their house.
Love it. Yes.
And that's the thing that freaked them out, because the horror was
it's in there. Yeah.
What's that line from one of the it's inside the house already. Yeah, it was inside the house already. So that was Dick's theory as to why the Omen was so.
That's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So,
I love that story because it's like, I remember there was an X-Files where they had some serial killer that wrote, I think in blood, if I remember right, some passage, but it was like Revelations 42:12, which there aren't that many chapters in Revelation. So, they just made it up. But I kind of thought, wow, it's kind of interesting that they thought they needed to make it up, because there's an awful lot of stuff you could mess with for the X-Files in that kind of what they call apocalyptic type stuff, where you got all these animals and beasts and all this stuff going on, so that's interesting. I've actually never seen The Omen, but because really scary movies freak me out anyway. But I'm kind of tempted right now to check that out. So anyway.
It's quite terrific. It's funny. I also had the pleasure of working with Billy Friedkin, who directed The Exorcist.
So you got both, man.
Yeah, and Billy also, he directed an episode of Tales from the Crypt.
Okay, all right.
And, I'll just slide into showbiz story for one more second, then I'll get off. Billy was great to work with. When we wanted to hire Billy at the second season that we were on it, our executive producer, one of the other executive producers, in addition to Dick Donner, was Joel Silver, who I've told stories about here, and he's a notorious screamer. And Joel Silver, the screamer, was telling us, "What, you don't want to work with Billy Friedkin? He's crazy. He'll kill you. He'll kill you." That's just a lot of irony happening in one place at one time. It can really freak you out. Anyway, so we hired Billy, and Billy did an episode called "On a Dead Man's Chest," about a tattoo artist whose tattoos come to life.
Oh gosh. I think X-Files had one where somebody's tattoo started talking to him or something. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, no, this the tattoos, because it was kind of voodoo tattoo that came to life, and we it all took place in the world of garage bands.
Okay.
And Billy didn't want to hire actors to pretend to be musicians. He wanted to hire young musicians for the band who had musical chops. And one of the actors we hired at that point was a guy named Yul Vasquez, who's now works a lot. And at that point, he was very early in his career. We had Greg Allman had a small part. Jonesy from the Sex Pistols had a small part as well. Okay. So we had a couple of rock legends in the script. And Billy wanted to record the music live.
Oh wow!
This garage band, which in our mindset is no, we pre-record it, and then everyone pretends, and we shoot the thing, and that's just how it is. And Billy just didn't want to do it that way. He wanted to do it. It would have been harder and more time consuming, but it would be better. But Billy, that's how Billy wanted to do it. And so as the producer on that episode, I began to try to talk Billy down off that ledge, and Billy did what Joel told me he was going to do. Billy just began to about 5 minutes of Billy just telling me why it had to be this way. It had to be this way. It had to be this way. I'm, all right, Billy, you win. You win. That's right. He went on for another 10 minutes. And finally, I just Billy, stop, man! I gave
That's
up
right.
10 minutes.
That's right.
But
You
aside from
won. You
that,
won. Yeah.
he was
That's good. That's
great,
good.
great to work with.
You know,
Anyway,
and speaking of that, down the road sometime we ought to look at some of that apocalyptic kind of scary type stuff from the Bible. It would be pretty fun because Revelation's a big one, but you've got in Daniel, you've got some stuff,
oh
and
yeah,
Ezekiel starts in just a wacky way. Anybody out there wants to look, just read the first few chapters of Ezekiel and try to picture what's described. But it's, there's some amazing, the way, what it does to your imagination as you're trying to read it is pretty awesome stuff.
I'm seeing a segue.
Yes,
And now,
definitely.
When when he went and composed these thoughts, he didn't sit there in his little apartment there. He went out to the desert, did he not?
I like how you're trying to transition this. That's good. That's good. Yeah, often the place of these kinds of visions or experiences or callings, are often in the wilderness or the desert or that kind of thing. And that's definitely, what I wanted to share because, one of the things that we talked about in the last podcast was that experience you had with horse therapy, a key part of it is getting you out of your own head.
Indeed.
And so, and we talked about how that really seems like an important thing for people, especially today, post-pandemic, is getting out of not just our houses, but out of our heads for a little bit. And so as I thought of that, it was like, there are actually a number of times that I wanted to just kind of tell these little stories and see what you thought of them. When I was really drawn out of my own head in kind of wilderness situations, as you brought up.
You have been in some definite what I would call wilderness situations. Now let's take a moment to ponder the wilderness.
Yes.
Because one of the things that I took from our last conversation was our idea of the wilderness now as a place to get away from it all.
Yeah.
It's a pleasant escape.
That's right. We want to get out of the city and go to somewhere where there's peace and quiet, right? Yeah.
And in the minds of the people who are writing the texts that we're talking about, the wilderness was not that place.
Right. I mean, that's often for many humans, it's the place where people live, the village, the town, the city is the place of safety.
Yes.
And the place of, when you go outside of that, it's actually more dangerous. A great example of kind of this way that we've changed in our thinking about, the wilderness versus where we live. Mm-hmm. An elder, he was actually a pastor, Presbyterian pastor in Mozambique in Southern Africa, once told us a story about how he had been as a little boy outside of the village and a lion had treed him, basically. Like he was running up the tree hiding and a lion was going after him.
Had treed him.
That's right. So
that is the verb. I tree, you tree, we all tree.
Right, that's right. I mean, and you could see the other people that were from there just kind of, they totally knew it. It was like, oh my gosh, these animals that are out in the wilderness, they can be really dangerous. It's much safer to be in the village. Sure. So it's just kind of this different mindset. And so when you read about like the Desert Fathers or some other people, part of their going out into the desert or the wilderness, it was a very gutsy move. It wasn't like I'm retreating to safety. It was more like I'm engaging the evil, that be by going out there and camping, living, making myself be out there in the caves among all of the wild things that are out there. And so, I think, there's been a big flip-flop for us in that. And I think in a similar way, even related to the Omen, there's been a big flip-flop in some cases for us because the world of the spiritual is the world of the creepy. And it rather than
the
spiritual is safe, it's more like, no, that's kind of weird. At least certain parts of it get really creepy and scary and strange because we're not in control and that sort of thing. And so the stories that I wanted to tell are stories that are much more like your horse therapy story, in the sense that it's not the spiritual as creepy so much as it is the the spiritual as like mind opening and comforting and calming and all of that, even when it happens in an unexpected way. So having said that, I do need to say one thing to everybody here, because I need to acknowledge the fact that as a Presbyterian pastor talking about these types of spiritual experiences, it's kind of breaking the mold a little bit, because
Are you talking out of class here?
Yeah, I may sound a little more Pentecostal in some ways as I'm speaking here. And the more you know about the church, that Presbyterians in the long haul, we were the ones that we would always say, now calm down, let's speak, let's be decent and in order about all of this stuff. None of this weird, hand raising and tongue speaking and serpent stuff. That's not us. That's not what we do. We don't think that stuff happens anymore. What we want
What did you refer to the group as? There was a funny little nickname
for
was it the Frozen Chosen?
Yes. See, that's one of the in-house names. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, the in-house names for Presbyterians is that we are the Frozen Chosen, meaning, number one, that we're the ones that talked about this predestination idea, which we've got to talk about in another podcast, because what people think that means versus what it means is often different. But that's the chosen part. And the frozen part is because, the stereotype is when here's a Presbyterian, studying, look at my face. And here's a Presbyterian worshiping. So, that the frozen chosen, like we just don't express a lot is kind of the stereotype. So for me to be saying these kinds of stories, not to mention, Alan, confessing it to my Jewish atheist friend, is just a little unusual. So,
you are living dangerously.
This is, this could be a little scandalous and dangerous for my career, but I'm moving on. So, okay.
Makes you a rock star, dude.
I've got to give you one more joke, and this is very in-house, and it's usually, if you're not a Presbyterian, you can't use this joke with a Presbyterian. It's only Presbyterian to Presbyterian. But there's a passage in one of the letters of Paul where he's talking about where do people go after they die, what happens. The phrase is, the dead in Christ will rise first. Okay, that's the verse. The joke is to say, hey, did you know that Presbyterians are mentioned in the Bible? And the person says, no, tell me where Presbyterians are mentioned in the Bible. And they say, well, it says the dead in Christ will rise first. In other words, we're the dead in Christ because
we've chosen frozen.
That's right. Exactly. So that's another in-house joke. If you're Presbyterian, you use that with other Presbyterians, feel free. But anyway, all right.
Now, if I can I would have thought that would have been Methodists.
Sorry?
I would have thought that would have been Methodists.
Well, see, the crazy thing, I mean, Presbyterians too, but Methodists, the Methodists of today and the Methodists of John Wesley are a very different crowd in many cases in the West. Now, in the non-West, they retain some of that. But, they certainly had a method, but it was a Methodist means that there's a method that they would do when they got together of looking into their own lives and confessing to one another and all that stuff. There was a method about how they did that, but they could be pretty lively. So it was definitely, there's the Presbyterians were kind of the stereotypical non-emotive group. And then the Episcopalians, there's a lot of Episcopalians say about themselves that they're Whiskopalians, that is, that they drink whiskey and the others don't. So they're Whiskopalians, and then you have the frozen chosen Presbyterians, and then there's like Baptist in-house jokes about, like, one guy who's a famous Baptist speaker said, I don't smoke, dance, or chew or go with girls that do. That was kind of a joke about how Baptists don't do a lot of things that other people would do. So yeah, there's all this in-house humor.
Is Meatloaf a Baptist? Is that what he's talking about? But I won't. I would do anything for love, but I won't do that.
That's right. That's right. Although, I mean, we got, there's all sorts of interesting differences between the Protestant denominations. There's a billboard outside of, I think it's outside of California, that talks about the mark of the beast or something, which comes from Revelation. But their whole point is that it's the people that don't worship on Saturday, like the Bible says we're supposed to, and worship on Sunday instead. That's the mark of the beast, because they're a very fringe group of the Seventh-day Adventists who, like our friend that we spoke to. But
yes.
it's this strong version of it, of people that have decided that if you don't worship on Saturday but on Sunday, then you're just screwing up the entire church. So there's a whole fun or could be depressing history of how Christians have decided to divide up amongst themselves over different issues. Nevertheless, let me get to
so as I imagine you in the desert, am I thinking of the character in Monty Python, Life of Brian, the hermit, the hermit in the desert?
Blessed are the cheesemakers. What? The cheese? Why are the cheesemakers blessed?
No, I think it's all makers of dairy products.
That's right. No, yeah, the first one, let me just start. The first one is in nature, but it's not so much in the desert. And this was early on when I was really trying to own my own faith. My parents brought me up in it. We've talked about that before. I was deciding this is my thing too. I'm not just going to do it because my parents did, but I'm going to own this thing. And so one of the things I would do, this was while I was in college at Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas. I actually would go from my dorm early morning, walk across a couple of freeways that there was nobody there yet. And I found this spot where it was a wonderful tree stump surrounded by ivy, that you could sit there and look out at a great panorama of the San Antonio skyline. I just came upon the place. So I would go there regularly. Well, one thing that started to happen there was, as I was there praying and reading my Bible, this huge bumblebees, and there's difference between bee and bumblebee, right? Like the bumblebees, you hear this, it sounds like a 747 is about to come across. I would have these bumblebees show up on a regular basis, not just there, but there was like a 2-year period where whenever I went to my parents' place and I went into their backyard and was having my prayer time, a bumblebee came by. And it was just this weird.
Not just a bee, but a full-on.
Yeah, it was a full-on big, huge bumblebee thing. But they just go right past me, and I'd just be sitting there. Now, and you can, maybe that's hokey, maybe it's not, I don't know. But the thing I got from it was this sense of, hey, you're doing the right thing. It was like this serendipitous sense, like, oh, this is a good thing to do. Why with a bumblebee? Who the heck knows? But that was just the feeling I had. And again, it was the beginnings of kind of this, oh, wow, if I put myself in a certain kind of place, I can be drawn outside of myself. On this first trip to the wilderness, as it were,
and you had said that you were finding your own religious identity apart from your parents' religious identity.
Right. It was kind of like this thing they brought me up with. Is this going to be mine? Which goes back to our discussion about Jewish identity and Christian identity. It was really an option for me because I'm not culturally a Christian in the way that you are culturally Jewish.
Yes.
So it's like, am I going to do this thing or not? So yeah.
What puts it over the edge?
Honestly, what put me over the edge was the collapse of my family, my sense of identity, because of my parents' divorce, because of going to Texas after I was in high school in London and all my friends went to other colleges, the breakup of a girlfriend of 3 years. I didn't really have anything left in terms of who I was. And the last thing I had was, okay, there's this faith thing. Could this faith thing help me out of this life where I feel like I've got rubble all around me?
Yeah.
Could this faith thing do anything for me? And that was the beginning of finding out in my case, yes, it actually could reconstruct a sense of identity, purpose, and meaning in a really powerful way, that could move me beyond the grief of the loss of the previous identity. Yeah.
That there is some potent testimony, Randy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah, no, but that's seriously why I do this stuff and why I'm a pastor, is because I found that faith could build a better life than I even thought I could have. And so, you see kind of back to some of the Hollywood, presentations of this, the evangelists are the hardcore power hungry people that want to control your mind. But for me, it's like, hey, this thing has really been really important in my life. And it's not like it's exclusively mine. It's more like, this is something that other people have found helpful too. And I would love to help you consider it for your own life. And of course you can say no. Of course you can choose to do other things. And of course there are other options out there. But this is something that I've found to be sustainable and resilient and strong enough to walk me through the ups and downs of life. And so, therefore, I would love to walk in that consideration or journey with you as well, if that's something you would like to do. But it's just it's an offer that's not a pressure thing.
But you are a viable data set.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. It's like, hey, this is something I've really found over decades and decades and decades of living in multiple countries and multiple situations, going through life we've all gone through. And it's been adaptable. It's been helpful,
But isn't that the nature of the spiritual journey? It's you're on your own, but yes, you can discover that others are on a similar journey, and that doesn't impact your journey, except to perhaps enhance it.
Exactly. And
because it validates.
That's totally. Exactly. And you get to critique other people's expressions of these things.
Sure.
It's not, that's where it starts to get cultish, is if you don't get a say. It's like, no, you swallow this whole and lockstep with me, the leader.
Yeah.
Or else you buy my books in mass and you get others involved in this thing, or else, that's where you're in a cult. We've moved from spirituality to a weird power play, cultish, bizarro thing that can easily happen in something as potent as spirituality. But if it's something where you always have the opportunity to think it through yourself and critique and make a decision for or against, you're on solid ground, and check it out. See what you think, see what you decide,
when faith really took a hold of you, you were at a very vulnerable place.
Definitely. Yeah. And someone could have powered up. I like to think that I would have been smart enough to eventually say, no, sorry, not going to do that. But you never know, because I don't want to act like, oh, I'm superior to people that fell for some of the cults. But that's the thing, is you're in a vulnerable place when you're seeking that spiritual identity. And so you've got to be careful about who you trust with that. With the new platform I'm developing, virtually, one of the key things I've realized, I've got to build trust with people, because I'm trying to work with people that are disillusioned by institutional religion. So the last thing they need is someone else to promise them stuff that's not going to happen.
Right.
What they need is somebody that they can trust, that's actually going to care about them and want the best for them, and be willing to back off if they say back off, and that's, I'm trying to figure out how to do that with folks I don't know, who have already been burned a little bit, or disillusioned a bit. So, yeah. So, all right. So here we go. Now I'm going to transport you. Okay.
So that was experience number one. All right. So
that was a key first experience. And it was in nature.
How old are you at this point? So we can keep track of you?
Yeah, that was college. So that was what, 20, something like that.
Okay.
And I want to note the nature piece. I had to be in nature, and it was an animal in nature. But that's something so many people find to be true in spirituality, is getting out of your head is a lot easier when you're out of your own space, your own box, your own world you understand. As soon as you get out of that world, you're actually maybe vulnerable would be one word, or you're more open to unexpected things. And I love to trace it back to Genesis 12, right, where Abram, God says, leave all you know, go to a place that I'll show you, as yet undefined. And that's kind of the kickoff for the whole, journey of the Bible, is that Genesis 12, where it's like, leave what you know, is step one.
My mind went to Brian Wilson, In My Room.
Yeah, right. And what we're talking about is get out of your room.
Yeah. Right.
And even with your experience with the horse therapy, you had to go to a different place.
Indeed, I did.
And that's where this second one I wanted to share with you was in Mexico City. So this was after college. Yeah. This was after college. This was, I went after college. I've talked about this, the book, The City of Joy, wanted to try to get as close to what life was like for the poor of the world as I could. Through a long process, ended up in Mexico City as the start of that. And in Mexico City, I was out of the world I knew. I'd lived in some other countries, but I'd never lived in the non-West at that point. And, and Mexico is certainly not, there are other cultures that are more different than the West, but they're still not the West. I think most Mexicans I know would be like, yeah, we're not like European West. We're
sure. Yeah, something else entirely.
Yeah. And so it was different language, different culture, all that. Well, I was living in this, one of the things I love about the architecture, the Spanish architecture, is the roof's flat, right? So you can get up to the roof and sit on the roof. So I'd go up early in the morning I was with a bunch of other college students. I'd go up early in the morning, sit on top of this roof where I could see Mexico City all around me. And the city's huge. So it's just like, you just see on the days there was, the smog wasn't so bad, because while we were there, they estimated that, living there and breathing for a day was like smoking 2 packs of cigarettes when we were there. But on the clear days, I could look around and just see city just teeming with people in this world that I was still learning. It was a wondrous world, but I didn't know it. And I was certainly not an inhabitant of that world. Just walking down the street, I would typically be a shoulders up above everybody else. And at that time, I actually had blonde hair, believe it or not, a full head. So it's like, I couldn't hide. I couldn't just blend in. It was like obvious whenever I went anywhere. So I stuck out. But anyway, these morning things, I started going up in the morning. And again, it was related to Bible reading and singing and prayer. But as I would do that, I would be drawn out of myself in a wonderful and encouraging way that would just strengthen me for, okay, I'm in a land I know nothing about. Cheryl my wife is learning Spanish way faster than I am, but I'm trying. Every day I have a lot of knowledge about the Bible, but I can't even say it to people because the language is not there. It was just feeling inadequate. But being up there, I got this. Every time I would feel so encouraged and strengthened each morning. So I started doing that every morning. But then there was a period of time when I kept doing the exact same thing. I mean, I structured it the same way to have the same experience. Right. But over a period of time, it was like, wait, it's not working anymore. It's like, I'm not leaving my mind. I'm like still stuck in my stuff.
You assumed it was automatic.
Yes, I thought I had figured out how to control the experience.
Light switch.
And that was the exact time when, the thought that came to me was, and again, in religious terms, but it was, I felt like God was saying, I'm not a one-armed bandit that you can just like pull and hit the jackpot. It's like, sorry, that's not how this works. I gave that to you for a period of time. That's great. We're done. I'm not showing up here anymore, and it's not under your control. So I share that because I think that's another key experience. I know with you, if you went, Alan, to do that horse therapy and you tried to do it in the exact same way every time to get the exact same results,
the horse would stare at me like I'm an idiot.
because that's not the nature. I mean, exactly what we're talking about, and part of the spirituality and healing is you've got to let go of control of the experience as part of the experience.
You have to be in the moment. You
Yes.
have to be not just in the moment, you have to be in the
Yes.
moment.
Right. And
You
that's
have
like,
to
I mean, all
experience
of us,
the moment from within.
totally. And that means you've got to release, you've got to let go. And I think there are a lot of us that have had experiences where, like, we're in this beautiful setting, say, like the mountains and trees, and we feel like we're drawn outside of ourselves. But then we're like, oh, I want to get a picture of this and capture this.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as you do that, that part of the experience is gone, and most likely your photograph is not going to capture what was going on.
Remotely, not even remotely.
Yeah. So I mean,
You just have to be and say, I pictures would not have done it justice, but
that's right.
Trust me.
But and that's the thing. That's part of, I think, the healing that spirituality can give us, is that we learn that actually letting go of control is actually an important part of being a human. Being in control all the time is not the way to be the best human.
We cannot control the universe in any way, shape, or form. We're not even pawns, man. It's not even moving us, it's just dropping on us.
Right. And going back to even the quantum theory discussion, we don't even understand what that is, much less our consciousness, much less, so this idea that we can control things at any level is actually just kind of not a really wise idea given the realities. We can understand a lot of things, but to think that we can control, that's where, I won't mention any names, but some stories you've told in the past about others. Some of the things that I've thought of is they're control freak. They have to control everything, or they think the universe, the universe is actually about them. And when that happens, you don't become a very virtuous person. You become a lot of other things. I'll put it that way.
But then if I went to Hollywood looking for virtue, oh,
that's true. That's not the place to go.
There's a line from Casablanca. Yeah. Rick says, why'd you come from Casablanca? I came here for the waters. What? It's the desert. I guess I was misinformed. I was misinformed when I came to Hollywood looking for virtue.
Well, but when you run across, that's what makes people like Nelson Mandela, for example. When you run across somebody that's so pivotal in their life, and yet somehow they learned along the way that it's not actually all about them. Those are the people that I really look up to. They've got power, influence, and all that, but they know that it's not about them.
One could describe Nelson Mandela's time in prison as his time in the wilderness.
Yes. Exactly. I mean, I think that's the thing that, he still needs, I still so respect him that prison would result in that, because there's so many people that have prison experiences that it just makes things worse. But somehow for him, there was a transformation that took place.
He didn't walk in the door presidential. He walked out at presidential.
Exactly. And that's the thing, I guess I would want to encourage people that are going through tough times right now, is tough times and spirituality can actually result in you becoming, a much better human being. That is a possibility. I want to give you hope, because it's not necessarily like, things didn't work again, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. It's like, no. There's actually a way as humans that we can be in super tough situations or really blow it in life, but then we can find a way that stuff actually makes us stronger and better people. And people like Mandela are an example of that to me, that give you hope that, life can look like it's going to fall apart, but there's still all sorts of possibilities.
What does not kill you makes you stronger.
That's right. Yeah. Don't lose heart. Don't lose heart on that. All right. I'm going
to do another.
You ready?
20, and how old are you at this point?
That one was just a couple of years after. So maybe 22, something like that.
22. All right. So we're tracking you. Okay. So.
Yes. All right.
A few years go by.
I'm going to jump us to an island. This is where I get into more maybe our wilderness kind of thing, even though, in a way, Mexico City for me was a wilderness, not for people that live there, but for me, it was like, I don't know how this place works. I don't know the language. I don't know.
Wilderness is a relative term.
Exactly. So now we're moving, though, because they gave us an opportunity after being in Mexico City for a while. They said, okay, now we're going to give you a rural experience of working with churches, which is what I was doing there. And they said, okay, here's your options. You can be in Acapulco. A bunch of people, oh, me, I want my rural, yeah.
Froze a little there, apologize. Acapulco?
Yeah, the idea was that people got excited thinking, oh, I'm going to have a rural experience in Acapulco. What they didn't understand was that you were going to be on the other side of the mountain. You know, the Acapulco kind of goes down to the ocean. There's another side of the mountain that's much tougher and rougher. And that's where a lot of the people that work cleaning hotel rooms live. And that's where they were going to end up living. But their first thought was, I want to go there. But then because of why I went down, because of this book, City of Joy, they were like, and then there's this really hard one that only 2 people can go, and it's really hard. And it's this island called La Isla del Tigre or Amapala in Honduras that, 2 people are going to go to. And I was like, me, because I'm just weird that way. And because it was like, hey, I can get even closer to people that are even more desperate because I want to know what life is like for them and build relationships. So I ended up on the island of Amapala. Okay. So it was as advertised. It was really hot. The first time we went on a walk from one village to the next.
Humid too, I'll bet.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I took one little of water because they warned us that in the next village, the well was, the water was not good in the next well, so we should bring water. So I brought my little thing of water. Before we got there, I'd already drank the whole thing because it was like walking in a tumble dryer. It's like you were in a tumble
Oh gosh.
dryer on the walk over. I had iodine drops, which is all we had, which is sort of effective, but not always. So I had to get water from the bad well, put iodine drops in it, and throw up a little missionary prayer, which is, God, I'll put it down if you keep it down. That's a missionary prayer.
Put it down if you keep it down. We're learning so much inside dope here. This is amazing.
So I almost passed out by the time we got to the village, and it was like, this is going to be a tough place. They had deforested most of it for canoes and wood burning. That's the only fuel they had, etc.
They cut down all the trees, so there was no natural shade.
So there was no natural shade or even air conditioning because it was crazy. There was one little spot that still had trees. And when we'd walk through there on the path, the temperature dropped and there was breeze and everything. And as soon as we got past it, we're back to like the tumble dryer heat. But I was out on a beach. I mean, one of the blessings was we lived on a beach, black volcanic rock beach called Playa Negra. So it was beautiful. Again, but we slept in hammocks, no plumbing or anything. Oh, you'll love this. The one toilet that they had there that we could use was out in the water on rocks in a way that when the tide came in, it'd clean everything out, right? So it was up on some rocks, and it used to have, a room around it, an outhouse, right? But a storm had come through and the outhouse had been blown away. So it was just this really white toilet sitting up on top of rocks on a beach so that everybody could see it, which was the only sit down toilet, right? So, yeah.
You couldn't write this. You couldn't write this.
It was pretty awesome.
Wow.
So we would wait until the evening. I actually learned to control my intestinal system quite well while we were there because we would wait until total darkness.
And it was dark there, and I bet it was really, really, really dark there.
Yes, it was.
You couldn't see anything.
That's right. No, it was nighttime when it was nighttime. There was no doubt about it because there was just not a lot of electricity at that time. So I would go out onto the beaches in the mornings, early morning, and would do what I've talked about in these other places. I would, spend time in meditation, prayer, read the Bible, pray. Well, one time I just got drawn out of myself again. And I felt like there was this big question that was being asked of me, which is, would you stay here the rest of your life if I asked you to do that? Which was, I lost 20 pounds while I was there, okay, because of what we were eating. And that was in 3 months. I mean,
or not eating.
Or not eating. And the idea of living there the rest of my life was about the worst thing I could think of, right? But it felt very much like a challenge. Like, are you willing to do this? Again, it was something very outside of my head. It was something I didn't want to do. But it was one of those moments in my faith where it was like, am I willing to own this so much that I'd say, okay, sorry, I'll visit the US every once in a while, but I'm going to live on this very hot island that's very poor, that, doesn't have a lot of the stuff that I love in life is not there. Was I willing to do that? And it was just this challenge that was left out to me. And I struggled with it. And I finally said, yes. And here's the weird part. Again, believe what you want to believe about this. I said yes. It had been a totally still morning. I said yes. And this huge rush of wind out of nowhere, it scared me, just blew past me. And then it was back to total silence again and stillness. And I'm like, okay, something happened there, and that was kind of weird. And I'm just going to roll with this. I'm a Presbyterian. Can I think this has any theological meaning, or was this just an aberrant weather thing that just happened at the right time? I don't know, But again, for me, it was like, okay, that was my challenge. I passed the test. What was in Lord of the Rings? I think the Elfin Queen or something. At one point, she's offered the ring, and she does this. I would be a queen who, blah, and she just becomes this.
Yes.
And then she says, I passed the test. I will diminish and go into the whatever with the elves. It was that. So it was like, okay, I think that was a test, and I think I passed that one. Yay, that kind of thing. So again, out of the body kind of spiritual experience that I had not planned or thought about. I mean, I've tried to make those things happen, but I know the ones where it's like, okay, that was something outside of me, like controlling this, and wacky. Make of it what you will. And I certainly don't make it a have to kind of thing. Which relates to the story I want to tell you that you were very interested in from my notes about my interaction with a Pentecostal on the island of Amapala.
Yes. Now, before you get to
Sure.
the last incident,
Yep.
As you went from across this pivot in
Yep.
your life, you, aside from the decision, well, if you felt that God was compelling you to stay there, you would have stayed there as long as you felt he was compelling you to stay there.
Yeah.
Aside from that certainty in your head, what else, did anything else change?
Yeah. It really loosened my hold on what my life would look like.
What your life would look like on your future.
That it was more like, okay, this
Sure.
is no longer I just need to make the decision kind of thing. There's more to it. It's more complex. It's more of a following or trying to see if there's a leading in a direction and following that rather than me just deciding. And that's honestly, that's how I got to Silver Lake. People thought I was insane in the church I was in when I showed them the directory for Silver Lake. Because I was in a big steeple church in South Carolina with 1,000 some odd members. And I was on a fast track that if it had all gone well, I could have been kind of a big steeple preacher type. And so when I told the leadership in South Carolina, yeah, I'm going to go to Silver Lake to a church that's been dying for about 30 years that has, on a good day, 80 people show up and worship in the middle of urban LA, where in a community that's not particularly religious, shall we say, they kind of looked at me like, what planet are you? That's not the script, but to me, it was like, I know that's where I'm supposed to go next, and I'm going to go, and that experience on that island was a part of that I had learned. It's like, I may get real curveballs on things I'm supposed to do, and I need to follow those because even if it doesn't totally make sense, that's what I need to do. So
in a sense, from the point of view of everyone there in South Carolina, when you headed out to Los Angeles, you were heading into the wilderness.
oh, totally. Oh, totally. You don't know how many times people are like, well, LA is where you turn the United States on its edge, and nothing that's nailed down. Everything that's not nailed down goes to LA, right? You know that. I'm like, yes, I know. That's the land of like nuts and what are they? Fruits and nuts. And I was like, yes, I am aware of that. Yes, it was. Yeah, it was definitely an out of the, and that's how I ended up, later in Mozambique. I mean, again, I was ordained as a Presbyterian pastor in Mozambique. You don't do that. You don't go to seminary in Pasadena and then get ordained by, people that you're still learning their language. That's like, but everything fell into place for that, including my knowing the exact person who could call the right person in our denomination to get them to understand that, oh, we actually can ordain people that way, and then make connections with a Presbyterian Church of Mozambique that I didn't know anything about before. The path opened up, but it was a very unusual path. And I've actually found, and I said this in my book, God in La La Land, in the intro, I was trying to introduce myself, and I'm like, I live on the fringes. And I enjoy that. I like to live. The fringes
I would
are
say
really
that's a
good
very,
place.
yeah, that's an accurate description. But from, you are on the edges of what normal would be for someone you are absolutely at the very edges of the fringes.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to float my own boat here, but a friend of mine who's
if you won't, I will.
A friend of mine who is a pastor, I was telling him what I was doing next with the all virtual platform I'm developing. And he's like, it's like you walk on water, man. And what he meant by that was, it's like you do these things that, that I can't even figure out how they're possible. And then you go and do them. But again, it all goes back to that experience on that beach where it was like, if I get a curveball thing, but I know that it's not me just making it up, but it's something more than that, then I need to really pursue that and see if that's the thing, because I'm not the one. I can't see everything. I don't know everything. And so therefore I need to be open to next steps that surprise me. I need to be open to that, because that may be the most fruitful and adventurous and exciting place I could go, rather than just sticking with what I already know.
Is there one more?
Yes. All right. I'm going to do this one from Mozambique.
All right. So this is all right. Of course, you have silly question. Yes, there's the Presbyterian guy. There's the what was he? The guy I've messed the story up.
Oh, the Pentecostal guy.
Pentecostal.
Oh, well, let me, if I can give you that one quickly.
The story that we've come to.
Yeah, let me do you the Pentecostal one quickly, and then move to one last one.
Oh, okay. I thought the Pentecostal was it? Oh, the Pentecostal.
No, the Pentecostal one, he's on the island in Amapala, right? So I'm there as a missionary. I have come to this. It was hard to get to the island. It was not like you took a flight to Amapala at that time. It was like you took a bus from Tegucigalpa, and then you took another deal that kind of off-roaded to a port, and then you got in a dugout that thankfully had an engine, but it was a dugout canoe that took you to the island. There's a lot of work to get there. So I got there. I'm giving up time in my young life to be there for the sake of the church, right? I'm working with churches. And after one church service where, I'd done the sermon in that church service, and afterwards, there was a visitor to that service who was a Pentecostal Christian. Now, we can define that, but the key thing is that he was a branch of Pentecostalism that feels like you have to speak in tongues to fully be a Christian, okay? And speaking in tongues, we could do a deal on that one. That'd be fascinating. We ought to invite somebody that speaks in tongues and have a conversation. That would be good. But
we wouldn't understand them.
That's right. That's right. But see, biblically, the idea in the Bible is that if you have somebody that speaks in tongues, you have to have somebody that's going to interpret what's being said for everybody else, or else don't do it publicly. Keep it to yourself. So, because they already had that problem in the very early church. People would break out into this language that didn't make sense to anybody else as part of their worship experience. And it started to throw things out of whack because it got confusing, and people would start to say, look at me, I can do this, you can't, that kind of thing. Well, anyway, that's a different story. But this guy,
not everyone's good at improv.
Yeah, that's right. But this guy, in a very caring way, he came up to me after the service and he said, look, I'd like to talk with you. Okay, let's talk. This is in Spanish. He's like, do you speak in tongues? And as soon as he said that, I was like, oh no, okay. And I'm like, no. He said, would you like to? I said, well, I have prayed that if that's something God wants me to have, I am open to it. I have not received it. I don't have it. I'm fine with that. You know, and a part of me in my mind was saying, you realize the commitment I'm showing here by even being on this island, right? I mean,
I'm like, it wasn't committed. Good enough.
I'm all in, you know.
Still, you're doing it wrong.
Exactly. But he was like, well, no, but you let me pray for you so that you will speak in tongues. And I'm like, okay, fine, go for it. You know, I'm like, you know, and he prayed.
Let me push in here for a second. Okay.
Sure, go for it. Go for it.
This world-weary atheist, when he hears this conversation, and yes,
I'm sure it's like, what planet are you from? Yeah,
my eyes are rolling so hard I might never get them out of my forehead. Now, surely you're rolling your eyes too.
See, there's this strain within life, but it seems to get amplified when it's combined with spirituality. But it's the person that sincerely feels like they're very much ahead of other people, and they really want to help those other people get to the advanced stage that they are. And they say it in a very concerned way, but basically they're being super pushy and they're trying to make you look like them. And again, it happens in all sorts of ways in life, but somehow when it's in that situation, it was just even more offensive. It was like, come on, dude. But I was at the place where it's like, okay, I could either tell the guy, just get lost, moving on, or I could say, fine, do your best here, you know, go for it. And if I speak in tongues, yay, you know. He prayed for me. I didn't speak in tongues. I'm sure he thought it was because I didn't have enough faith or something, but I was ready to move on. And that was the last time I saw the guy, of course, because he's not going to come to a church where the person preaching doesn't speak in tongues. I mean, how could he tell him anything? You know, and again, that is one of the challenges of spirituality, because again, you can easily start to want to control it, you know, but the fact is,
well, we all experience it differently.
That's right.
We all do. And it's when one person tries to impose their spiritual notion into another person's head where it isn't the same.
And it's imposed. I mean, if he had come up to me and said, you know, I've really found speaking in tongues to really move me forward in my spiritual journey, and if you'd ever be interested in thinking more about that, I'd love to work with you on that. Fine. You know, okay, no problem, but thank you, and I'll get back to you if I want to do that.
Sure.
So that, you know, to me, it's like, fine. You know, you found that important in your life. You want to share it with others, great. But it's this idea that somehow the other person, you feel sad for them because they don't have what you have. That's where it's just like, oh, come on, please, do we really have to do this? All right, for the sake of time, I want to just jump to my Mozambique one, because I feel like it ties it together in an interesting
absolutely. Way. All right, so how old are you now? Just so we
can I'm gonna so I go from Amapala, I finish that, get married, because I met Cheryl there.
Right.
We move to LA. I go to Fuller Seminary in Pasadena, go through that Master's of Theology program, takes 3 to 4 years.
A different sort of wilderness, but
that's right. But I loved that wilderness because I'm kind of the academic nerd type with that sort of stuff. Then after that, we went to Mozambique. that was where I finished. I had my degree, but I was not yet ordained.
Right.
But
Right.
the things opened up that I went to Mozambique and
Gotcha.
was going to be ordained there and work with the church there to help them, because Mozambique had been in civil war for 40 years. That was like horrendous, like destroy all infrastructure and people will rebuild afterwards kind of civil war that, had connections outside of Mozambique as well. South Africa, the US in some ways, although there's still debate on how much the US was involved in it, but there was a lot of real destruction. And they had just signed a peace treaty after 40 years of civil war. And so we were being sent there to help support the church that had lived through this 40 years of just horrendous stuff. And they were excited about it, and they wanted to ordain me, on behalf of the Presbyterian Church in the U.S. as a pastor that would work with one of their pastors in Mozambique. So that went really well in the southern part of it. I've got to fast forward. I ended up in the northern part of Mozambique after a time, because once the elections were successful, there was a time where it looked like we were going back into civil war again, which I was pretty nervous about because we had already moved there. But it worked out. And so then, though, all the funding dried up. Other countries said, oh, you've had your elections now. We're not going to fund you anymore. And so, long story, I'll just have to jump forward. So we ended up living in Harare, Zimbabwe, and I would drive into northern Mozambique to work with churches up there, because they didn't have any kind of leadership. They had very little leadership up there. And so I was working with them to strengthen the churches there. As refugees were coming from Malawi, which was next door, and trying to rebuild their communities after this war. So what that meant was, on my drives in, I would drive from Zimbabwe across the border and in this area called the Beira Corridor. And I had to check with the U.S. Embassy in Zimbabwe every time before the trip, because there were demobilized soldiers. They didn't do a good job. The UN missed the boat on the demobilized soldiers, like training them with new job skills. So there were groups of them that were attacking cars, killing the people, burning the cars, and taking everything they could, right? So I had to say, okay, is the Beira Corridor safe for me to drive? And once I got the okay from the U.S. Embassy, then I would make the trip using a missionary's Nissan Patrol, which is a pretty cool car to be driving. But I'd have to go through both border crossings, which was always a challenge. And then once I get into Mozambique, the roads had huge potholes from all the tanks using the roads and ripping up the roads. Monkeys would be running across the street as I'm driving. And there are no gas stations. There's no infrastructure, just the villages. But there were also these signs on each side that said in Portuguese, warning, landmines. So I couldn't get off the road. I had to stay on the road, drive the road, and it was me solo driving to this village.
Oh my God!
Mind. And I listened to the BBC radio version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as I'm driving through here, just trying to get into my head, how is this one planet? We've got one part of the world where they're doing these awesomely funny comedy about sci-fi, and yet I'm driving past a village that's struggling with food issues, and they're landmines. And I could never quite get my head around the whole world like that. That never has worked for me. But here's the story. I went in I pick up a young guy who spoke 6 languages. He was 18 and he spoke 6 languages, tribal languages, Portuguese, English. It was just insane, very sharp guy. He'd go with me because I was working in some different tribal languages I didn't know. I knew the Portuguese, but not the tribal language. So I took he and a couple of elders to a very poor village to visit there and encourage them. They killed a goat, which was crazy because a lot of their kids were malnourished. But that's what they do. For when people come in, you kill an animal, you make a big meal, and you celebrate. They brought in the goat. The goat still had hair on it, which was a little bit of a deterrent. But remember, my missionary prayer was, I'll put it down if you keep it down. But the other part was they had this mealy meal. They don't have bread. They don't have leaven. So it was more of a, it was almost like malto meal that stuck together, you know? So that would be part of the meal. When they brought that in, it had a sour smell. And I looked at the Mozambicans I was with, and they looked nervous. And I'm like, oh, crud, this is not good. If they're nervous, I'm nervous. But again, there is no way I could not eat what they had prepared for us.
Of course, you're stuck.
So,
You will.
yes.
There's nothing to be done.
No. So I ate it. We had a good visit. I was okay.
What was it again?
It was this mealy meal is one of the ways they translate it, but it's basically it's like malto meal or like flour. It's just that it's you'd actually grab a chunk of it. It would hold together, maybe almost like rice in a way. It would hold together though, and
it's a grain.
dip it into the sauce and eat it.
It's a grain that is used to as the basis to put food on top of the grain.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. And so there was that with the sauce. There was that with this. Right. It was off somehow. Something wasn't right with it. So we're eating that, and I did fine, and we had a good meeting. And then we went back to where I was sleeping out in a thatched hut of one of the elders in a different village. Right. So we go back to the village. I go to sleep. I wake up at about 1 a.m. in a thatched, hut. I think it was 6-hour drive away from where I was living, like where, what I would call civilization, which of course is just my notion of it, but what I would call. And I didn't have anybody else to drive me. I would have to drive. Woke up 1 a.m. and I felt the most stomach sick I've ever felt in my life. And stomach sick is probably the worst kind of sick for me. I can handle other things, but like when my stomach is really nauseous.
Yeah.
Plus, we were talking about the toilet in Honduras, right? I would have loved to have had that toilet because this place, it was a hole in the ground. Yeah. But oddly enough, what they had done is they built up a clay part from the hole in the ground. So it went up to about waist high, and then it curved and there was an opening there. And you're supposed to somehow get up on top of that to go. So I put on my headlamp because there's no electricity. It's 1 a.m. I'm incredibly nauseous. I'm walking over. I find the place, but as I walk in, there are cockroaches by the thousands coming out of this thing. And I look up and they're even all over the ceiling, but that's the only place I can go. I mean, I'm not going to go in the guy's front yard, right? I mean, it's like what I have no choice. So I'm just moving cockroaches away, trying to go, and you can guess the big D was there in abundance. And then I go back and lay down again in a thatched hut. I've got a fever at this point. It was just terrible. But here's
that's an understatement.
Here's my spiritual moment, though. My spiritual moment, which it reminded me somehow of the bumblebee, but it wasn't a bumblebee. It was just, I was looking around, I felt terrible, and suddenly this strong peace came over me that said, you are where I need you to be. And that was what I needed. It was like, okay. And the nausea lightened up a bit. I had to drive out the next morning. I didn't sleep, so I'm exhausted. I'm feeling horrible. They were very nice trying to help me with my stomach issues. Because they've had stomach issues too. I mean, it's not like, so they could see from my face. They're like, oh, we'll just make you some tea. And how about just some rice? And I'm like, I don't think I can even handle the rice. But I had this long drive, but I made it and was able to get to the house where Cheryl was in Harare, Zimbabwe. And then I was able to take the many days it took to get over that. But it was again, one of those things where I was totally out of control, no expectation of anything happening. And then it was suddenly like this strange peace and like, you're where I need you to be. And I was like, all right, that's all I need to know. I'm good. I'm there. And so, as I've shared this with some other Presbyterian pastors that are willing to talk about these kinds of experiences, they're not the same for people. They're very different for different people. And so what I would encourage people in is just
can I just say those are
please.
great stories, Randy. That they were really sensational.
Oh, thank
stories.
you.
Oh, my
Oh,
God,
thank you. I'm glad you find them interesting
I've
because
known you all this time, and I'm finally getting to the good stuff. You've been holding back on me.
well, and okay, so I've got to screen share this one thing that's related right here. This is me at a happier time in Mozambique. So can you see that?
Oh yeah. Let me put on my glasses here.
All right, so that is the outfit I was ordained in, and they gave me this.
Hey man, you have hair.
Yeah, and I had hair. And notice that they're not the frozen chosen. These are Presbyterians, but man, when they worshiped. I mean, there was something going on. The other thing is there's a bench to the side of me. What we were doing is we were going from a thatched church to a brick church that they had built, and they were celebrating moving into a more fixed structure. So they took all the pews, those benches, out of the other one, and we were walking together and celebrating and dancing as we went to the new church. So I just wanted to share that, but that was a joyful thing. I was, again, obviously I stood out in that culture. People could tell I was not originally from there.
You were not a local.
That's right. But that's where a lot of the amazing spiritual experiences happen, because when you do that, you've already put yourself in a place where you're out of control. And again, even you're going out to visit that place for the horse therapy, you had to actually decide to try a new experience. You had to decide to go out there. You had to make the effort for all of that to occur. And I find that that's an important part of the spiritual life, is being willing to step out of your norm. And then suddenly you're going to start having some of these kinds of spiritual experiences because you're not in control. You're not in your room, as you know, with the Beach Boys anymore. So,
and on that bombshell.
That's right. Right there.
Put it right back to in this room. That's genius. I can't improve upon that.
That's right. And so, spirituality.
Get out of your room.
Hand in hand. Get out of your room. So, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Alan, for letting me share those and being attentive and asking questions. That's wonderful.
My God, the amazing stories. I can hardly wait to edit this so I get to hear them, really.
I appreciate that. And here's the crazy thing. I've got about 4 more that I wrote down that I haven't even shared. So some other time we'll have to, one's on how I got a sense that Cheryl and I needed to be married. There was a wacky thing that happened there. Another on why we live in Echo Park. A wacky thing happened there. There's just a lot of little things like that. And again, it's not a crazy thing. It's I think I'm supposed to be attentive to this, and this is supposed to relate to something going on with me, and that kind of thing.
There have been moments when your purpose and your path have been quite clear to you.
Yeah, and certainly others where it has not been clear at all, and I hate those times personally. That's when I go nuts. But yeah, So if that is what spiritual enlightenment has brought to you, then you are the Buddha. And on that bombshell, no,
that other bombshell. Thank you, everybody. We will see you all again soon, and stay healthy and get out of your head.
That's right, totally, and looking forward to it. Can't